Hi there, I'm the _Twig, and I like analysing game rules. We have a new Unearthed Arcana with a bunch of vaguely magical themed subclasses. As always, I'm going to be reviewing them out of order because I think that makes the video flow better, so let's start with the Warlock. The Vestige Patron Warlock is something that I had honestly never really considered before, a pet-based Warlock subclass. The reason why that seems so bizarre to me is that all Warlocks can already choose Pact of the Chain, which I'd argue is the best pet in the game. This subclass means that you can start running around with 2 pets if you want, although based on this stat block I do question whether you actually want to do that, and I answer yes, of course you do. Chain is the best pet in the game. This stat block doesn't hold a candle to Chain. It doesn't have hands, it can't go invisible, it can't release touch spells, you can't ride it as a deer, it doesn't have Sphinx skill checks, it doesn't have pseudo-dragon sleep, it doesn't have Spirit's Heartsight, you can't just freely have it use help or magic items, and there's a bunch of other things that Chain does as well. But what does this do? Well, it has a decent attack at low level, although since it never scales, it drops off quite quickly. It is, however, a 60-foot ranged attack, meaning it doesn't need to be on the front lines if you don't want it there. Next, it's got one of 3 once per day abilities, of which the only one that I think is particularly exciting is Fiend Swap, which lets you teleport to swap places with it. There is a combo here. Much like the Find Familiar, buried in this wall of text, it says that you can temporarily dismiss the pet and resummon it anywhere within 30 feet. Neither that resummon nor Fiend Swap requires sight, meaning this is a 2-action teleport through a wall. That is not terrible. Also, its HP, AC and saves, except strength, are reasonably okay, and if you ignore it then it just automatically dodges every turn. That makes it pretty good at just sitting there and absorbing attacks. Also, unlike any of the other subclass pets, resummoning it after it dies is just a 1-minute ritual. You don't need to spend any spell slots or materials to get it back. That inclines me even more into just treating this as a big meat bag. So, how does this actually play out? At low levels, I think it's actually a pretty effective use of your bonus action. An additional 1d6 plus 6 range attack is actually remarkably good at low levels. And if you have a chain as well, that's using your action, so it's not even competing. At level 3, this subclass with an imp is averaging just over 17.5 damage per round, after accounting for the mischance. That's frankly insane, only 2 damage behind a dual-wielding berserker, and actually ahead of a greatsword berserker. Once you start getting it up in levels though, it becomes a lot less impressive, especially if you're planning to take investment of the Chainmaster, because then your Vestige Pet and Chain Familiar are competing for your bonus action. At this point, I think you just have it sit there on the front lines and absorb damage. Okay, what if you aren't going Chain? What if you're going Blade? In that case, it's just a free bonus action attack all the way through, and that's perfectly serviceable. In summary, this pet is not and will never be able to replace Chain, but it's still a very desirable feature. That is not all you get at level 3 though, because you also get to choose the spell list of any PHP cleric. This is extraordinarily good. I don't think that you pick Trickster here, their spell list doesn't really give you a ton of stuff other than Pass Without Trace, but Light has Fairy Fire, which is probably the second best concentration spell you can get on a Warlock before level 5, only behind Suggestion, as well as Scorching Ray and Fireball for when you want to blast. War then gives you Spirit Guardians, or even Crusader's Mantle if you have a melee heavy party, as well as Shield of Faith, Freedom of Movement and Steel Wind Strike, all of which can be relevant. The best one, however, I believe to be Life. Aid and Cure Wounds are exceptionally good on the Warlock. The restoration spells are always good utility, and Short Rest Death Ward is extremely interesting. Basically, this subclass gets a great spell list. 6th level Vestige Recovery lets you use those once per day features once per short rest. I don't think that's too impressive. But then when you get to 10th level, your familiar gets a 30-foot aura which gives the entire party resistance to fire, necrotic and radiant, and immunity to both charmed and frightened. Those damage types give coverage over roughly a quarter of the entire monster manual. It's so much! Furthermore, whilst it has this aura up, you get a Death Ward effect, although when it triggers you lose your pet and its aura until you long rest. Unfortunately, this Death Ward effect is not optional, because if it was, I'd probably be tempted to just not use it and keep my Walking Tower of resistance to 25% of the monster manual. Now, this aura is not technically permanent. It lasts for a number of hours equal to your Chair mod, likely 4 or 5, which is absolutely enough, and it ends when your familiar disappears for any reason, either by dying or by you putting it in its pocket dimension. And once it's over, you can't turn it back on until you long rest. That's still a hell of a long period of giving your entire party resistance to a quarter of the monster manual though. This is a ridiculously good feature. Finally, 14th level. Once per day you get a free cast of one of these summon spells which gets auto upcast to half your Warlock level. Weirdly though, rather than it being a separate summon, you're turning your pet into it. At worst, this is upgrading your pet's middling bonus action attack into 3 attacks doing something like 2d6 plus 10 each. Except there's a really odd little rules snag. Because you're turning your Vestige into the summon, you technically still apply this Vestige in combat section. Your summon can't do anything unless you use a bonus action to command it. And if for some reason you wanted to give up your attack instead, it technically can't do anything, because it can't use Vestige's strike whilst transformed. Really weird niche little rulings thing, and I find it incredibly annoying. Obviously it isn't supposed to work like that, and I'm actually not even sure how exactly you address this issue without making another paragraph of text which sounds like absolute nonsense to anyone who isn't super deep into the rules, which you don't want to do. Rules like this should be easily understood by an 11-year-old. Overall though, this is an extremely good subclass. It would be even better on another class which didn't already have chain. For example, this on a sorcerer would immediately lose that clash and just be incredible, but even when you're picking between your chain and your Vestige pet, the rest of the features are still pretty damn great. Next we have the Oath of the Spellguard Paladin, which is a sort of defensive Mage Slayer type paladin. At level 3, your Channel Divinity lets you choose one target, and then for the next hour you can use your reaction to add your Cha mod to their AC against one attack, whilst they're standing next to you. This is Protection Fighting style with a different hat. Protection gives disadvantage to attack rolls, and this lets you add Cha mod to their AC. They're relatively comparable bonuses, though I think Protection's is probably a bit stronger. Also, Protection doesn't cost a resource. Oh, and it works on everyone, not just the guy you designated when you used your Channel Divinity. And actually Protection gives disadvantage over all attacks, not just the first one. The only things that this Channel Divinity has over Protection are that you can use it without a shield, and if you have a reach weapon, it has a range of 10 feet. This Channel Divinity is worse than a fighting style. The spell list is actually very good though. Everything here is perfectly reasonable, with the worst spell probably being Hallow, which is still occasionally relevant. Shield, Silence and Counterspell are the standouts, but Dispel and Circle of Power are definitely saving preps, and the rest of the spells do come up from time to time. Very solid list. Finally for 3rd level is Spellguard Strike, which lets you make a reaction attack when somebody standing next to you tries to cast a spell. If you aren't fighting a spellcaster, or they're standing on a wall so you can't get next to them, this feature doesn't exist. Actually, there is one thing that you can do. If your druid casts Cure Wounds on you, you can use Spellguard Strike to attack the druid and then cleave into your enemy. Don't do that. Here we have the fundamental issue with this subclass. Spellguard Strike, Shield, Counterspell and Guardian Bond all compete for your reaction. You can only do one of those things, and I think that the answer will very rarely be Spellguard Strike and essentially never be Guardian Bond. These features are inherently anti-synergistic. On their own, Guardian Bond and Spellguard Strike are still not great features, they're passable at best, but together, and with this spell list, they're almost never going to get used. Let's go to level 7 though. Everyone in your Aura of Protection gets advantage on concentration saves. That sounds fantastic, until you remember that Warcaster exists and is probably the best feat in the game. Almost every caster is taking Warcaster at 4, and if they aren't, then they're probably taking it at 8, or have another feature like Eldritch Mind, which means that they don't care about this anyway. And no, just because you have this aura does not mean that the casters are free to skip it, because they won't be standing next to you 24/7. At best, this aura says that you get to skip Warcaster, assuming that you're not playing on a table where you care about somatic components, because casting shield whilst holding a shield is infamously annoying. This aura is unfortunately kind of irrelevant. Next up though is level 15, Spellbreaking Blade. This kind of fixes the reaction clock, although it's level 15. You've likely either almost finished the campaign or have actually finished and so never got this feature. It lets you use Spellguard Strike's reaction attack and cast Counterspell at the same time. Once again, if you're not standing next to an enemy caster, this doesn't do anything. I don't want a level 15 feature that doesn't work against dragons, beholders, krakens or vampires. Then finally, the 20th level capstone is actually a pretty good one. Everyone in your aura has advantage on saves against spells, and your pretty crap Guardian Bond Channel Divinity upgrades to resistance to everything. That makes it worth using. This is a level 20 feature though, so I kinda treat it as if it doesn't exist. This paladin is unbelievably mediocre. I don't think it's bad, I think it's skippable. This is a subclass that I wouldn't really complain about if it got printed as is, but would never use. It's just supremely uninteresting. The next subclass, however, is quite interesting. The Magic Stealer Rogue. First up, crap name. Features though. Level 3 Empowered Sneak Attack gives you the ability to int mod per day when anyone, friend or foe, casts a spell, store an extra number of sneak attack dice to use on your next turn. In concept, interesting idea. In practice, this is a mediocre as hell feature. First up, int mod per day. That's probably about twice, maybe you get up to 4 times at higher levels. Second, it only stores for 1 turn. If you miss, then those stored sneak attack dice are completely wasted. Third, it uses your reaction, meaning that you can't use an opportunity attack or something to get a second sneak attack off. Finally, fourth, if no one casts a level spell on the turn that you wanted to use this, you can't use it. Now, that third one, using up your reaction, I'm actually fine with that. In fact, I'd greatly prefer it if rogues didn't feel like they needed to use double sneak. If I was redesigning the rogue from the ground up, I'd probably remove double sneak entirely and give them some other sort of damage scaling instead. To that end, I actually really like this idea of giving the rogue some kind of alternative damage source. I just don't think this is a very good one. It's not the only feature that they get at 3rd level though. Drain Magic lets you end a level 1 or 2 spell on a creature and then give that creature back a spell slot. The intended use case here is to save your wizard from a hold person. I don't think that's happening very often though, and if the enemy instead targeted your barbarian with a hold person, then they don't get the spell slot refunded. Unfortunately, there's a much better but much weirder use. Let's say that the wizard casts See Invisibility. On the 59th minute, you can walk up to the wizard, end the spell on them, and refund their 2nd level slot. The See Invisibility was effectively free. Even better, let's say that they instead cast Longstrider. In that case, you not only refund the spell slot, you actually upgrade it from a 1st level slot to a 2nd level slot. You give the wizard more magic than they used. Even betterer, what if the wizard ritual cast Detect Magic? This feature is a free 2nd level spell slot every short rest. That's undoubtedly a good feature, but it's absolutely bizarre. You're breaking the first law of thermodynamics. Nothing else in D&D can do anything remotely close to that. Now let's pause. One of the big problems with Rogue is that their subclasses don't get anything between levels 3 and 9. You need your level 3 features to be pretty damn great, and these kinda just don't really cut it. From level 3 to 8, your subclass is kind of just Pearl of Power every short rest. Now, Pearl of Power is a good magic item, but a good magic item isn't a subclass. Fortunately, at level 9, you get an absolute banger of a feature. 3 new Cunning Strike options. Either give the target disadvantage on its next save against a spell, a sort of precast counterspell effect where the target needs to make an int save or the next spellcasting is wasted, or you can steal something's resistance for a turn. All 3 of those options are great, and you can use them every single combat, probably multiple times. Level 13 is back to the crap features though. Permanent non-detection on yourself. Non-detection is only ever important if you're being scryed on, and even then it's still not great because the rest of the party can still be seen. This is pretty rubbish. Also at level 13 though, your weird as hell Drain Magic feature upgrades so that it's a bonus action and it both works on and gives back 3rd level spells. It's a good upgrade to a good feature, but it's still really weird. This isn't really draining magic, it's more like it's recycling magic. It's absolutely bizarre. Finally, level 17, your kinda crap level 3 Empowered Sneak Attack feature gets one hell of an upgrade, because it turns into a counterspell that stuns. I have no idea why. This subclass is just the oddest thing I've seen in a while. For the most part, it's just giving the casters 1 extra spell slot per short rest. Several of the features are strong, I guess, but they don't really help you as a rogue do your job. The only feature that I actually like here is the 9th level Magical Sabotage. All of those are really cool. But on the subject of really cool, Warrior of the Mystic Arts Monk. So, this one is definitely the most exciting thing in a UA, probably since the Scion, and only because that was an entirely new class. Ignoring the Scion, I don't think there's been anything as interesting as this since the 2024 books released. We have absolutely been brewing with this one in my Discord. It's a 3rd caster, like the Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster, but I think it's way better than both of them for several reasons. The most fundamental reason though is that monks are far more willing to give up their action. A significant portion of the monk's power is in their bonus action, so if you cast Fireball or whatever, you aren't giving up all of your attacks to do it. Now, unlike the Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster, this Mystic Monk is based on the Sorcerer, not the Wizard. That's a worse spell list. You don't have Find Familiar, Longstrider, Augury, Locate Object, or a bunch of other great utility spells, but you have enough. At level 3, I think that Blade Ward, Minor Illusion, Detect Magic, Jump, and Shield is a perfectly serviceable loadout. One of my patrons, however, Precipice, has actually already done a one-shot with this monk at level 10, and found that between his movement, patient defense, 19 AC, Blade Ward, and his pre-existing reaction defense in deflect attacks, he never felt the need to cast Shield. That actually makes a fair bit of sense to me. I wouldn't typically take Defensive Duelist on a monk, so I actually question if you even take Shield. You might actually want something like Disguise Self or False Life instead. All of this stuff helps monk in the area that they most needed help, non-combat. Every other class in the game either gets spells or something like Expertise or a fighter's Tactical Mind, which helps out with skill checks. Monk is the only one in the game that is kind of lacking in stuff to do when not punching people, and access to a few low-level spells really helps out. We're already on for a winner, but then we reach level 6, Mystic Focus, which is basically just straight up Font of Magic from the Sorcerer, except that you use your focus points, which refresh on a short rest. At level 6 this is okay. If you get to your short rest and have some FP left over, convert it to slots. You get to have a few extra casts of Shield or Jump or False Life or whatever else. Where I get really excited though is level 7. At level 7, every single day you can convert your unused spell slots to up to 8 extra focus points. Typically, I assume 4 combats per day with 1 short rest. With Mystic Focus and Uncanny Metabolism, you can use your full pool of 7 FP every single combat. The amount of FP that this monk gets is insane, and if you have some left over when you get to the short rest, you can just convert them into spell slots and then convert them back out when you need them. Your spell slots can sort of serve as a battery at a 2 to 3 recharge ratio, and they mean that you will almost never run out of FP. That's not all you get at level 6 though. You also get the Blade Singer's extra attack, allowing you to cast a cantrip instead of one of your normal attacks with the attack action. Now, the thing that most people instinctively jump to is True Strike or another damage cantrip. I don't think that that's quite right though. I think that there are 3 options that you want to be using this on. Blade Ward for extra defense, Mind Sliver to give minus 1d4 to the stunning strike save, or if you're a small species, you can use this to cast Minor Illusion, making a box around yourself to block line of sight, allowing you to run away without provoking opportunity attacks. By the way, Mind Sliver isn't a damage cantrip, it's a utility cantrip with a rider. I'm going to say something kind of insane here, but I think that you could remove this monk's ability to cast leveled spells and they would still be the second best monk until tier 3, only behind elements. It is that good. Next up, level 11. Centered Focus gives you advantage on concentration saves. At level 11 this is kind of just okay. You're probably concentrating on either Suggestion or Web, or maybe even just Blade Ward. And whilst those are good spells, it's level 11. You're kind of not too bothered if your concentration drops. Where it gets interesting though is level 13, when you get 3rd level spells. Now, the 3rd level concentration spells people normally get excited about are Hypnotic Pattern and Fear. I don't think that those are great anymore because so many things are immune. I think that you want to be casting Sleet Storm, Slow, or Cacophonic Shield. Sleet Storm and Slow are excellent control spells and essentially nothing is immune to them. They are amazing opening turn casts. Cacophonic Shield, however, is basically just Spirit Guardians, and you have the movement available to run across the entire battlefield. These are spells that you really want to protect your concentration on, and at 14 you don't just have advantage, you also have proficiency in all saves and a 1 focus point reroll. And if you remember, this monk has goddamn infinite focus points. And that makes Centered Focus kind of just okay again. It's definitely nice to have advantage on concentration saves, but you kind of just don't really need it. You've got so much concentration protection already. Finally though, to top out this otherwise outstanding subclass, we have the Capstone, which doesn't do anything. When you take the attack action, you can instead cast a level 1 or 2 spell. You could already do that. Technically this does count as using the attack action, so it does potentially trigger certain things like the Charger feat, but I actually can't find a single useful thing to do with that. This one needs a change. Although given how strong the rest of the subclass is, I don't think it needs much from its capstone. In all honesty, whilst it sounds incredibly late, getting 2 meta magics would be enough. I don't think that that's what they should do because it sounds a bit crap to general audiences, but this capstone does not need to be anything special. Besides, the actual capstone is getting 7 4th level spell slots at level 19 before considering short rests. Eat your heart out, Eldritch Knight. The only other thing of note is that the Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster get a second ribbon feature at level 3. I don't think that this monk necessarily needs one, but I would appreciate some kind of focus point drain. Maybe something like spend an FP to add a martial arts die to an intelligence check, so you're a bit better at Arcana. Now, I said that we have been brewing in my Patreon Discord. I'm not going to talk about everything that we said, but I do specifically want to point out how good Lorwyn Elf is on this monk. First up, guidance for even more non-combat support, but then you get command, and by converting your focus points you can spam command with the pros. Even more importantly though, silence. As a monk, you are the premier grappler. Flurry of blows a couple of times to grapple the caster, then drop silence and they are stuck in here with you. Really cool combo. With Mage Slayer giving disadvantage to the concentration saves on each of your 4+ attacks, you can turn this into the best anti-caster to ever walk this land. Screw you, Spellguard Paladin. If you do want to see what else we came up with in my Discord though, you can join my Patreon. Although, beware that SK, Mark Rainbow, Bunny, Jaleli, Precipice, Jars and Not Curtis have taken to practicing their breakdancing in the lobby. It can get a bit excitable in there. If you want to see other fun stuff that you can do with a monk for free though, check out my ultimate guide to unarmed strikes. Bye!